Welcome to another episode of Coaching Outdoors. Thank you for taking the time to listen in wherever you are in the world. You might be out and about having a walk listening, or you might be sat down over a cup of tea. Wherever you are and whatever you are doing, thank you for joining us. So our guest today is Georgie, and Georgie is joining us from Scotland, and I'm going to hand straight over to her. She is outdoors, and it would be great if she can describe the setting of where she is. It does look gorgeous.
Hi, Anna-Marie. Hi, all listeners, viewers. I'm Georgie of Georgie Dunn Coaching, and I am here today on top of Gullen #1 golf course, which is one of my favourite spots to do both remote coaching and in person. And I'll show you where I am because it's probably easier and more beautiful that way as well. So looking down the hill, we've got Gullen Bents there, which is the main beach of the town I live in. And then we are cycling around, and that's the other side of Scotland. So you're looking at the sort of the Fife coastline. I've got a few oil rigs that have popped up here, and then you've got Coachingoutdoors and other landmarks. So it's wonderful we can see it today because you can't always see it, the Haars up and down, which is great in its own way for coaching. You can see the golfers there. And then we're coming around to the Forth Road bridges. You've got the railway bridge, which is the darker red one, and then you've got the white ones, which is the car bridge and the lights. And then going around to that wee glimpse of Edinburgh, and then the Pentland Hills. So this is me, and I like to take the conversations outside as much as I am able, and I'll be sort of walking around, so hopefully you'll be able to hear me and see me okay.
Thank you very much for that, Georgie. It's beautiful to see where you are, and it's a really great way for us to start our podcast today. And for those of you who are listening and not watching, I would recommend maybe popping on and having a watch of the start of this podcast so you can actually see what Georgie's describing. I'm over on the west coast of Scotland, and our view is not quite as nice today. So I'm liking that Georgie's sharing her view. So as with all of our podcasts, we're off with asking the same question, which we absolutely love to ask our guests because we get such a flavour of responses. So Georgie, can you tell us what your earliest memory of being outdoors is and why you love the outdoors so much?
Yes, so earliest memory for me, it's not a wholly positive one. I do remember going on holiday to Scotland a lot as a child, and actually I started climbing Munros with my family when I was about 5 years old. But I also remember the sort of the resentment that I had for other families, feeling that they were going to more exotic locations than I was going to. But I also do think that I used to get quite car sick when I was younger, and so it used to be a long drive from the Cotswolds up to Scotland. So I didn't really appreciate the views because I was feeling sick in the back. But that positive and negative slant on it built my resilience and grit and love of the outdoors and just pushing that extra mile up the hill. And I think getting the endurance in my legs from quite a young age has helped me in later life, and particularly in my sort of careers and outlook of what the outdoors can bring to me and others.
And I love the fact now that you've ended up in Scotland as well. So your earliest memories are from Scotland. Having grown up in the Cotswolds from your description, and that's almost like quite close to where I am down in the southwest of England at the moment. So clearly the lure of the mountains got under your skin, and you ended up there. Life's journey, your path ended up in Scotland. So having a look at your career and from that earliest memory to where you are now, having set up your business, Georgie Dunn Coaching, talk us through that journey and kind of key milestones that got you to where you are now.
Yes, the good old journey question. We love that, don't we? But it's just quite big. So I'm going to try and package it up nicely. I think the journey, I think I should start here firstly, is that every coaching conversation I have reinforces my passion for the power of coaching. And I've got a line on my website, which has become a bit of a manifesto of mine, you know, because I genuinely think if every professional had a coach and, you know, was supported in their thinking by a coach, we would live in a better world, because people would think more intentionally and just would think more clearly and better. So that's where I start, and that's why this job doesn't feel like a job, which is, you know, wonderful. So my 16-year army career was sort of characterized mostly of delivering sort of operational output, both on and off operations, and leading and working with quite a vast array of teams, actually. So I was part of high performing teams, selected teams, small groups of specialists doing particular projects, or bigger, larger teams planning for bigger, larger operational output. And so I got the whole scope, I think, of what's good about teams and what are the challenges of teams. You know, what are the underperforming teams? I was part of plenty of those as well, you know, and there's many areas you can look at for why that was the case. I think we sometimes have a lack of knowledge and skills in a certain area that people can't then deliver the output they need to, or you have somebody in a team that really picks up the rest of the team, and that becomes a high performing team. So yes, so I think there would be two main highlights for me that were fundamental in my coaching journey. And the first would be going back to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst as an instructor, having been there as a cadet, because it's, you know, every army officer's basic training, it's that year. And I describe the differences as a cadet. Definitely for me, I don't know what it's like for Anna Marie, but I always had my head down, rushing from one thing to the next, trying not to get told off for not marching properly, or I was carrying a heavy weight. And I think as an instructor, when you go back, you actually hold your head up high and you look around and you see that beautiful estate that Sandhurst has set in, the grounds, the exercise area, the woodlands, and everything. And you realise how far you've come to go back and instruct people and pass on your knowledge and experience and learn from the next generation coming through. So I absolutely love that. And it was my first real foray into proper teaching. And I loved it so much that I decided to study my PGCE as well whilst I was there. And I also did my first short coaching course, which was a solutions-focused coaching course. Won't surprise you that the Army gives you solutions-focused coaching training. And I loved that as well. And the thing for me was the ability to unlock with questions, not knowing the answers, which I loved. And I think I took that coaching and mentoring of the cadets, and that made that into my mindset as a leader moving forward. And that was a really powerful experience for me. And the second key part for me was my most significant leadership role, which was leading a training organisation of 100 at the Royal School of Signals. And we were delivering all the command, leadership and management training for all the soldiers that went through. And so the Royal Signals was, I think at that stage, my figures will probably be wrong, but about 10,000. So we had about 550, all of those on promotion, moving through our squadron from a week-long course to an 8-week-long course. But I'd also come back from maternity leave at that point with my first daughter. So I went back into a very challenging environment. Again, my instructors were selected and had really good, impressive careers. And I was coming back to a very physically demanding job where I'd be carrying weight and I'd be assessing, and I'd need to really lead physically by example as well as a person. And that really sort of stripped me back to where my confidence was and the resilience I had, and made me really think carefully about how I wanted to lead. And I had some really wonderful leadership days where I made my leadership models and we went outside, and it was those points that I absolutely loved doing. And again, that was the more creative side, and it was more of the coaching of my teams and just seeing how they developed, which really, really brought it home to me. So that was sort of a journey, the military journey side. And then our second child turned into second and third. We had twins. And my husband was serving as well. We're a military family. So we had 3 children with 2 military careers, and it just no longer worked. So I decided to settle the family in gorgeous East Lothian, which I'd been petitioning my husband to settle in for a while. But just because I just loved the coastline and just everything about East Lothian. So I settled there, and then stepped almost immediately into a senior leadership role in HR and financial operations. And that was a few months before the pandemic hit. And so I had an 18 months of very grueling time, really challenging time. And I'd done a lot of transitioning, a lot of changing. I had 3 kids under 5. And I sort of ignored the signs that I was not functioning at my best and feeling very depleted. And so at that point, I properly burnt out and needed to step away and just recover, really. And the key activities that helped me recover were beach running, walking in nature, mindfulness, and just giving myself time and space to think. And it's interesting because the neuroscience really fascinates me as well. And it was the fact that my executive function was so full that I just couldn't make decisions anymore, I often didn't trust my decisions. And I think if I have to give you a metaphor, if I'm thinking on the spot, it would probably be my true north had gone, as in I didn't know where I was heading. I didn't know where I was. Magnetic north was off because I was emotionally reacting differently to normal. My behavior wasn't what I understood to be me. And it was obviously the compass bezel had been smashed, or there was a bubble, and it just was off. And then the grid north, which is normally our framework, that we know is there, I didn't really understand it either. So all of my north pointers that normally help me orientate were just off. And I see parallels now when I coach of people who are really at capacity of their executive function. And it's interesting how nature can really help and unlock that just by giving us the space and perspective to do it. So fast forward a bit, I have done lots of values, identity exercises, looked at really what I love teaching, then thought, actually, what do I love about teaching? It's not the lesson plans and the marking and signposting to resources as much. It's more coaching people and just having conversations and listening and understanding where people want to go and helping them get there. So I decided to go back to coaching and study. And I think I needed the safety net of knowing that I would be current in coaching as well. So I built on that first coaching course and went back to school. I went back to Henley Business School because I'd done quite a lot of research and I liked the look of Henley. I liked the academic rigor. I liked the network I would have and as alumni. I think Alex was Henley, was she? And I went there, and also importantly, it was in person because I really wanted human connection and I really wanted to find my next tribe of coaches. So I did it in person and I loved that. It was traveling, a lot of traveling to get there, but I loved it. And I met some amazing coaches who I'm still in contact with now. And because I never do things by halves, I started my business as well as I was studying. But that's really where it all started. And I'm so grateful to have had the experience during the pandemic and from my military career to bring to this, because I really feel coaching has come at the right time for me, and I can bring a lot more because I have a greater perspective and sort of depth of knowledge in the area.
It's such a wonderful insight you provided for us there and for our listeners, and there's just so much there. And it's one of the reasons why we love that question as well, because everybody has a different route into outdoor coaching in their career, and your sort of coaching identity is often informed by where you come from and the reasons you've chosen to become a coach. I used to live near Sandhurst, so I could visualize some of that. My mum-in-law was a signal, so she was down in Blandford, and they still live down there actually. She's very retired now, but yes. So and then just thinking about all those things you're mentioning there, I don't have any military background, but just understanding a little bit about how that has influenced you, and how it's sort of brought you to where you are. And, you know, being in HR during the pandemic was just, you know, anybody in HR in the pandemic, I take my hat off to them. I think there's a lot of people who really suffered because of the stress and everything that was going on in the world of business at that time, as with everything else. So, but I'm really glad that you've, you know, sort of come out the other side, and it's sort of added to your journey and added to your kind of desire. And obviously Henley Business School, as you said, I'm an alumnus as well, so just having that as your background as well, like you said, the location is amazing, but the academic rigor is there as well, which means you kind of get all the benefits of a course like that. So you talked about the influences of your military career and how it's brought you to coaching. What would you say was your choice of, or why you chose to do outdoor coaching? Why did you choose to take your coaching outdoors rather than the sort of classic indoor coaching?
Yeah, it's interesting, and you get so many different answers to this question, don't you? I think it was an enduring love of the outdoors, but also a place where I felt most at home, because physical challenge for me has always been sort of a foundation of confidence, actually, you know, and I was always quite strong, and I really enjoyed doing that. And I think because I felt myself again in the outdoors, I was just toying with how I would coach and where I would be my best self as the coach, as well as how I could support clients best. And it was actually at Henley Business School on one of the weekends. We just decided to go outside because the Greenlands campus, as you know, beautiful river flowing straight by, green spaces, beautiful manicured bushes, you know, and we took the conversation outside, and it really unlocked for both of us the thinking, using just the natural environment around us, and it had a real effect on. It was peer-to-peer coaching, so it had a real effect on my fellow coach as well as me. I sort of thought about it more, and actually, there is a need to present your authentic self as a coach, but there's also a need to differentiate yourself in quite a congested market, I think. And I thought this is perfect because I love the outdoors. I've got the pedigree of the outdoors, and I know that it works. I trust in the outdoors, and I know that the ability to offer thoughts, you can be far more strategic outdoors, because you literally, I've got space here, you know, all the spaces here for me to share it. Whereas if you're in the office, you've got that sort of cage around you. So I suppose, yeah, I like to be uncaged. And I think clients really respond to it. So I suppose that's why I went outdoors, and every conversation, wherever it is, just feels far more natural and productive to me.
Henley Business School has got a lot to answer for. And it is a thread that joins all of us. I've never studied there, though. Jonathan Passmore invited me, after hearing me speak at a conference, to speak to the master students, which is where I met Alex. And I then went on to run a masterclass on outdoor coaching at Henley Business School, and watch this space for future events that we might all be collaborating on next year in 2024. Which we're going to be revealing soon, hopefully, which I'm very excited about. Has been a long time in coming. So yes, the space there really does lend itself. And, you know, I would love to see more coaching courses utilize the outdoor space. You know, clearly slightly biased, but I would love it if all coaching courses had an element of it, just to try to experiment, so that it became more just more common within the coaching world. There is a huge need for it, and clearly the work that, you know, you're doing, we're all doing, is hopefully a part of change to encourage more coaches to take their practice outdoors as well. But bringing it back to where you are now and the beautiful landscape, it would be interesting to just know, okay, well, where specifically do you carry out your outdoor coaching, and then actually how does this influence the experience that your clients have?
Yes, yeah. So obviously here at home in East Lothian, it's brilliant, and we do have the beaches and a number of beaches all the way around to Edinburgh. So that's great. But you also have the woodlands and the forest. So I like to have clients here and sort of host them at home. But I also love seeing where their favourite nature spots are. So I have a pre-coaching questionnaire that I send out and say, where's your favourite place in nature and why? And so I've coached on Lindisfarne, Holy Island in Northumberland, which is absolutely beautiful. And I thought it was going to be an absolute disaster because I got there and it was swarming with tourists. And I thought, this does not give us time or space to think. But we then went past the castle and onto the Pebble Beach, and all the tourists and melted away. And we were just left with this gorgeous view. And then we just had these pebbles that were all stacked on the beach. And we had this wonderful discussion, just using the pebbles and the beach as a backdrop. And there was also, I think, an obelisk there, which was quite an interesting object that we used, and I took a picture of, and that was part of reflection later. So I've been there. I do coach in the botanical gardens. So I've done Edinburgh and Glasgow. Again, botanic gardens are lovely because they're quite manicured, but they're also very accessible in the city. But lovely sort of city parks all across the central belt of Scotland as well. Kelvin River through in Glasgow. And then remote coaching I'll often do up here, actually, because the reception is, touch wood, okay. And I love the remote stuff because I'm here and I'm feeling relaxed and authentic and intuitive. And then my clients will be, in their favorite woodland walk in Beaconsfield or walking along a canal in South England or wherever. So I love that part of coaching as well, because whilst I am connected with them, they're also connected more readily with nature themselves rather than me. But we're still walking, so we're still engaging both sides of our brain, and we're thinking creatively, and we're focusing on that, wider perspective. So they all do different things. I mean, I love the beach because of that vast horizon, and the tides. And so if I look out at Fife now, I don't think, again, I had a session where we were looking at, if we're on Gullen Beach now and you want to get to the Fife coastline, what's in the sea for you? And we sort of mapped it out and looked at what was going on for them. And we can use some of the mini islands here. But it was good to look at what are the opportunities and what are the barriers. And conversely, in one of the city parks, a client was really struggling to know where to begin for a big bit of work that we just sat in a garden which happened to be circular and had benches around it, and we mapped out the work in little chunks and would move around and see how the perspective changed. And actually the takeaway for me was that it made them far more productive, because they told me afterwards. But for me it was stopping the linear thinking and giving that wider asymmetric view. I think some of us do think in a linear way, but something about coaching, to me, it's not very linear, and that's the beauty of it. We take away the lenses, the biases, the judgments, and we just do the thinking and just think that every thought is useful in its own way. So I love the mapping of the systems, but I also love the really organic, just picking up a shell and feeling it, and doing all that sort of stuff. And it's whatever really clients need at the time as well. But normally nature lends itself to whatever the client needs, I find.
So thank you, Georgie, for that. It really does link back to some of the things you were saying at the start of the podcast, and shared about yourself and your experiences, and the idea of, our executive functions being depleted and our directed attention needing restoration. And a lot of the research, and I talk about attention restoration theory a lot, but a lot of the research really does show that being outdoors really does help to restore that element of us. And interestingly, also further research showed that blue spaces were the most restorative, with green spaces not so far behind in terms of their power to restore us. So, what you're talking about there is everything, green spaces, blue spaces, high up, sort of low down, on the beach, in the woodland, etc. So I think, you know, there's so much richness there to your experiences with for yourself as the coach, but also for your clients as well. And I do love the idea of sending out that questionnaire beforehand, asking them about their favorite outdoor location. I know a lot of people contract with their coaches in different ways and their clients in different ways, but I think really asking them about that really helps as well, because you can very much tailor your sessions to their preferences and their likes. I always say as well, and we've talked about this before in some of our other podcasts, it's always useful to ask people if there's anything that they don't like about the outdoors. So if they're scared of cows, for instance, you know, avoiding fields full of cows, because there are people out there that, you know, really don't like cows. So thinking, you gave us some really great examples there. Are there any other examples that you can give us of kind of an experience that one of your clients has had? So what's it like for them to come to you and have that experience of the outdoors with you, whether it's remote or whether it's in person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think probably starting back with the pre-coaching questionnaire, because what I like to do is to build trust with the client as soon as we start. And I think trust is important for a number of ways, and it's the sort of the coaching buzzword. But I think genuinely, if they trust the safe container of the partnership, I think they will offer more authentically. And I think nature helps us trust ourselves in that environment. And you can offer things out in nature that you might hold back somewhere else. So I start building the trust early. I'm also aware that I'm a mum. I run a busy family and I have a business. And so what I try and do is I give the honest situation of why I can't make something, when I can make something, how I can schedule with people. So I'm pretty upfront. This is me. This is what I do. And these are my limitations, but the opportunities to coach with me. So I'm quite upfront about that. So when we actually get to the session, I've hopefully already built that trust and I've laid the foundation for a really authentic conversation. And I'll always find out how people are arriving to the session, you know, and it's sometimes grounding, breath work or mindfulness. But it's always like, how are you arriving? How many rocks are you carrying in your day sack? It's a metaphor I always use. And I'm sure it came from my army career somewhere. I can't remember. But, how many rocks we're carrying in our day sack fundamentally changes how we behave, view the world, and the emotions we feel. And so as a coach, if you understand how many rocks somebody's carrying in their day sack, how heavy that day sack is, then you can then partner with them and coach them accordingly. I'm not saying coaching takes the rocks out. I'm just saying you've got a more authentic understanding of where somebody's coming from. And so we'll do that. I love the walking side by side because again, that's it, engaging the brain, and but also it means that they're not having to look at you and they're not having to focus on you, and they're focusing on their thoughts. And we'll always have a framework within the coaching agreement that I have. We've always agreed 2 or 3 focus areas, that they're a broad framework to handrail in the session. But I'll keep it quite loose, and I'll let them explain, and then we'll just dig a little deeper. And the great thing about the sort of the dual coding side of creatively coaching is the talking and also making sense of thoughts that you can't articulate through the use of image and metaphor. So it will either be something that comes to mind, like I did earlier when I was talking about my burnout and I talked about my north and the true magnetic and grid, that just comes to mind in the moment because that's just how I interpret it. And I'll encourage clients to do that. And clients will sometimes say, well, I'm not really a visual person, or I don't think I'm that creative. And then I'll come up with this fantastic, metaphor that then they surprise themselves, as well. And I just think the brain's an amazing, thing to be able to do that and interpret the world like that. So imagery is a big part of it. Walking's a big part of it. I actually unconsciously, I think, started to bring flasks of coffee with me, because I'm a serial coffee drinker. And I know it's not everyone's poison. But I would bring coffee and sometimes even biscuits if I'd made them with the kids. And there was something about the sort of the hospitality of bringing a hot drink and the warmth and the sort of the safety and the comfort of a hot drink, which also helped the thinking. And I have to say the caffeine hit didn't hurt either. So I'd normally sort of offer before I ask them, what insights have you had so far? And I love doing that. But I'm sure tea, hot milk, hot juice, other things work. I haven't tried them yet, but it's client dependent. And I love walking in silence, actually. And you know what? The beach and the woodlands are particularly good for that. I'm sure you've both experienced that. In actual fact, on the beach behind me here, Gullum Bench, which I'll bring you around to, I've had a client come who just isn't ready to think because they've just had too much to process and too much has gone on. And we've walked that whole stretch of beach in silence just to allow them to unpack what they needed to unpack and then be ready to do some really good thinking. And you either can leave somebody with their thoughts or they can just listen to the waves. And I love that it's almost sensory overload on the beach, isn't it? You know, the rolling waves. And then you've got the seagulls swooping. They're pretty tenacious seagulls in East Lothian. You know, and it's just such a wonderful environment to just be, as well as think. Remembering that whilst we're being, our subconscious is still ticking along, doing all that good work for us anyway. So I love the silence. And I love the imagery. And I just like asking for takeaways and insights and what have you learned and where are we going with this, and just open questions and just be curious. And as a coach, trusting the process, I think, is the best thing you can do, because you innately trust your clients in a resourcefulness, and then paired with a powerful coaching process in the outdoors, it's win-win.
Silence is something that we are starved of within our lives a lot of the time, and I'm loving this idea of caffeinated coaching. And there is definitely something about bringing people together with drink, with food. You know, we are social creatures, and having that as a connector just really brings another dimension into the experience that you're facilitating, you are hosting. And insights as well. No, thank you for sharing them. Our listeners are always intrigued to be that fly on the wall in a coaching session, because it's something as coaches we often work individually. You know, clearly there can be some co-coaching, though it doesn't kind of happen so much. So just to have an insight into someone else's practice is a real privilege. So thank you for sharing that. And now coming to the challenges. And the challenges which you've faced along the way, maybe in becoming a coach, maybe in more the setting up of the business side of things. If you're willing to divulge what they were, we'd be fascinated to hear. And then how you've overcome them or not, and worked through, with, around in various different capacities.
Yes. Challenges, moving from employed to self-employed. It's interesting, isn't it? I think one of the key challenges is being a business owner without a team, and that sort of self-employed route. You can draw on people's experience, but you really are your own team. And I think that's been a real challenge for me, just because I've lived in teams for so long. I've learned to rely on others and myself to a certain extent. So I think that was a challenge for me to start with. And I think it remains a challenge, because I love the human connection. And when I'm walking in nature, I'll stop and chat to people. And, you know, I love the connection, the spark of it. So that's been, I think, the greatest challenge that comes to mind. Not having the team. And I know there are plenty of ways you can make that team if you want. And hopefully as I grow the business, I will be able to create my own team. But to start with, and I think that still remains today, that's the biggest challenge. The way I've got over that, I don't think I've got over it. The way I sort of treat that is I look for my other networks. So my alumni networks, my Henley coach colleagues, some have become friends now. I also have met up, well, actually virtually only, the ICF Scottish group, which is fab. And I hope to do more of that. And I'm also part of a local business women's networking group. So it's called Elevate Women in Business, which is run in East Lothian, which I enjoy meeting other small business owners. Then I do a bit of networking. I think you guys do networking in your various locations too. So again, small business owners networking, get together when you can, and it's, you know, and you understand how people's schedules change and you don't have to go all the time. So building those networks and connections, and they're all slightly different, which is nice. So I feel that I've got different networks in different areas. And then finally, I've sort of taken the plunge and decided to just join a more formal networking conference that is happening at Edinburgh in November. That's We Do Scotland, and it's business entrepreneurs and leaders. And I decided to pop along to that because, again, I love the chance to sort of talk about my business and what I do, but I also love connecting with other entrepreneurs and business owners just to see what's going on in their heads, because I think we should all stay current, because they're also our coaching clients as well, aren't they, as well as our network. So it's really important to stay current in that. So I think I've applied networks onto that, and in a way that has helped me overcome not having a team at the moment. If anything else comes to mind, I'm just sort of looking over at the Forth Road Bridge. And there are always many pillars that hold up bridges, and there's lots underneath the surface that you don't often see. I think if I went a bit deeper, I would probably say identity is the other thing for me, which has been a challenge. And I think it's because I wear so many hats. My LinkedIn profile does it quite well, I think, with my handle. You know, it's executive coach, mentor, veteran, mother, runner. You know, those are all kind of my identities, and it's how you marry those identities together and how you feel whole in yourself. And listening to clients and having coaching conversations, we question, and inevitably we then go back to questioning ourselves, you know, and particularly in reflection. And I love reflecting, and I journal, and I have a specific form that I've made for myself. And I do this with my supervisor. He's incredibly good at getting the question that throws me completely off guard. And we question ourselves, and it goes back to identity and who I am and why I'm doing this and why is it important for me. So I think identity is the other challenge, but I don't think it's a problem because I've got the support in place, and I'm in, you know, the headspace where I'm quite happy to be who I am, be all of those constituent parts. And actually, you know, my life is much richer because of it. You know, I'm a better coach because I'm a mother. I'm a better mother because I run and walk. You know, all of my other parts of my life are mutually supporting of each other. So whilst identity is a challenge, I think it's all part of being human, isn't it? It's the beautiful patchwork quilt of our lives, if I was trying to sum it up.
Yeah, so there's some great aspects there about sort of thinking about systemic thinking and the systemic approach, and that, you know, all aspects of our lives impact all aspects of our lives. And, you know, there's a lot there for our clients as well. And I find personally, and I'm guessing a lot of outdoor coaches do, that people become more open to the idea of the system when they're outdoors, because they can see a lot more metaphor and a lot more imagery in the outdoors that makes them think of, you know, you described it really well there, looking out at the Forth Bridge and seeing the struts going down into the water and thinking more deeply. You know, that in itself is a wonderful metaphor for, you know, thinking of all of the sort of parts of our lives and how they all impact on each other. And there's some really wonderful ways I think our listeners can really sort of challenge themselves as well around what are their challenges, and being honest with themselves, and what they can change and what things they might have to accept and do differently, or carry on, but just accepting. So thinking about another aspect of your life, of your system, we understand that you really enjoy voluntary work and doing a lot of volunteering, and it would be really nice to sort of get an idea of what current initiatives that you're involved in, and what volunteering brings to you in your life.
Yes, I think it would be slightly overstating it to say lots, because it's part of my daily balance and juggle. But I do love volunteering, and I chose a couple of years ago to train as a peer mentor for SAFA, the Armed Forces charity. And their mentors work particularly with military service leavers. And I really wanted to help, firstly, for just giving back. That sort of career of service continues on. I'm in the service of my clients, and I, really enjoy working with other people who have served. So I enjoy doing that. But I also, as part of my transition out of the military, I was keen to convert my military qualifications into civilian recognised ones. So I did an experience assessment and became a chartered member of the Chartered Management Institute, and also chartered member of the CIPD, the HR professional body. And I mentor for CMI, which I love doing. And actually, I found my first ever coach mentor through the CMI platform as well. So I have used it as a mentee as well as mentor now. And I love mentoring sort of business leaders. I get a really diverse range of people. And I'm just really aware, having done a course on subjective wellbeing and looking at that, and the importance of volunteering for us, the ability to give back without the need for reciprocity is really fulfilling for us, and it goes with a whole host of other activities we can do to help that. So I love the volunteering, but I also like the diversity and meeting different people from different sectors that I may not meet in everyday life. So those are the initiatives at the moment. I sort of have to switch them on and off as I can manage them. But it's always good to just have volunteering as part of my portfolio, because I really think it's an important part of how I can give back. I
think that's a really important point to take away as a coach, and drawing on your work life experience, how you can give back. And something that I'll definitely take away and encourage listeners to take away is, like, how can you do that? Like, what capacity is there? What need? What skill set? What does it then give you in different ways beyond the financial piece as well, which is business owners is a part of the way that we manage our work, our life, and how it kind of intertwines. So just starting to pull everything together, what would you recommend to our listeners that could support their coaching journey, whether it's indoors, whether it's outdoors, whether it's a resource that has been incredibly valuable to you and something that you still kind of interweave within your practice, or maybe a book or podcast or a thought leader who you follow?
So I have thought about this question, because I've actually used quite a lot of resources that other speakers on your podcast that have offered. So I got The Hidden Life of Trees and The Well-Gardened Mind. I'm a proud owner of Leslie Roberts' book, Coachingoutdoors, so I could recommend many books. But I think probably linking back to I think the longevity, if you're asking a question of what has really supported me longer term in my coaching, I think understanding the conduit part, the constituent part of subjective wellbeing. And I did a course hosted by University of California, Berkeley, which was called The Science of Happiness. And they have the Greater Good Science Centre as part of that, I think, from that university. And not only was the course fantastic, because it sort of married neuroscience, academic research, real rigorous research into happiness, And it showed how the importance of savouring experience and being grateful and journaling and volunteering and giving and all these parts that actually, instead of buying things, these are the areas that actually activated the brain to increase that subjective well-being. The whole resource there, online and podcast, draws on such a diverse range of things. I mean, you've got these amazing meditations that they record. You've got happiness, well-being calendars. They've got a professor there, Daphne Keltner, who does this amazing walk in the redwood trees, huge trees. There's just a lot on there, and I think it's offered in a really holistic, welcoming way, but still with the academic rigor behind it to show you that actually this does sort of help to build that subjective well-being. So it's offered in a really nice way. Nice is not a nice word, is it? But it's offered in a good way. That's one. The other one I think would be I'm compiling a nature notebook, and that's of all the images and walks I do. It's not necessarily all my sessions because I reflect separately on that. But just compiling a nature notebook is brilliant because you can look back on it and you can savor all of your experiences. But it also helps me remember things better because sometimes walks sort of meld into one. And it's quite nice to have that sort of image pop up and you remember something particularly from that image. But the nature notebook is also sensory in terms of I bring back leaves or shells. So I'm sort of compiling this. I don't really know. I'm calling it a notebook, but it's probably not really. Like a treasure box, I think my kids would probably say, of nature. And it's sort of that memory of the walks. And I think you build up a habit of doing that. And once you build up the habit, it becomes more deeply ingrained in your practice. So I think I'd encourage that along with journaling and reflecting as a really good resource. And you can make it your own. You can buy many online, but I'd make your own and make it really personal and authentic to you. So yeah, there's the two resources I think that probably would really or hopefully help.
I love the idea of that. That's such a lovely thing, and it also reminds me almost of being a child and going on holiday, and you kind of create a scrapbook when you get back, or you've got your sort of treasure box of things you've collected along the way. And even now looking back at something I collected when I was 5 or 6, because I've probably still got them all, it reminds me of a very specific memory or time or experience or feeling. So I think that's a really lovely suggestion and a lovely resource idea for people to use. Honestly, we're coming to the end now of the podcast and we're wrapping up, and you've just provided us with so much food for thought, so many ideas, so many insights and experiences that you've shared. And as Anna said, our listeners absolutely love listening to the stories and the experiences of our clients, and and your experience as a coach as well, where you've come from, how you've found your way to where you are now, both physically in your location in Scotland, but also sort of your work and where you focus your time now. And it's been such a wealth of information. And as I said, unfortunately, I've had to disappear off camera because my internet connection isn't great. But if you do get a chance to watch this rather than just listen, Georgie's background is just amazing. The scenery and the just seeing East Lothian and Edinburgh in the distance, and the green and the blue space. It's just lovely to have that imagery on camera whilst you're listening as well. So Georgie, could you share with our listeners how they can find you? Because we talked about networking and connection there, and you talked about reaching out to people, and I think a lot of people will probably want to reach out to you and get connected. So where can people find you? What are your sort of connection links?
Yes, it'd be fab to connect with listeners to the podcast. Coaches indoors and out would be lovely. So I have my own website, Georgie Dunn Coaching. I'm sure you'll do all the links afterwards, won't you? So I have my sort of blogs on there and things, and just lovely beach pictures. And I love the creative element of making the website. That was really fun. And then I do engage with social media. I do love following neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists. The key platforms I'm on are LinkedIn and Instagram. So feel free to message me through one of those means. And I look forward to having more conversations with people.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that, and very much the links and the resources that you have suggested. We will link them on your episode page, which will be published. But thank you so much for taking the time to take us on a walk with you in Scotland. It has been a real treat seeing the blue sky and the sea. Clearly in landlocked Wiltshire, it's not something I get much of, though I did disappear down to Dorset for a little bit of time on the southwest coastal path at the weekend, which is my kind of go-to 90 minutes, jump in the car, let's go running default. But thank you, listener, for listening in wherever you are in the world. What are your thoughts? What did you think? What resonated with you? Would love to hear, as ever. Please do share on LinkedIn in our community page. That would be amazing. And clearly this is one episode of many. We've got an entire back catalogue waiting for you to dip into if you haven't discovered it yet. So please do jump online. We are beginning to wrap up series 6. So there is a lot to listen to, and a wealth of knowledge from a whole host of amazing guests. So Georgie, farewell. Thank you so much for the final panoramic there. It really, Scotland is doing a good job showing off how beautiful it is.
Yes, and I call it the Scottish Riviera for good reason, I think. Thank you for asking me such thoughtful and insightful questions. I love sharing my little piece of heaven with everyone, and Coaching Outdoors is really important, and I love the podcast, and long may it continue. Thank you, ladies.
I'll echo that. Echo that thought. Long may it last too. Definitely. It's our passion project, which is, I can't believe it's like over 2.5 years since we started. It's been an amazing journey, and just the people we get to have conversations with is phenomenal from all around the world. So yeah, who's going to be up next in series 7 is what we're kind of bouncing ideas about at the moment.
Brilliant.
Thank you very much, Georgie. So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast.
Thanks so much in advance for your support.